And I'm going to close out this paragraph. It says, my consistent ridicule of materialistic devices such as televisions, telephones, and cars does not mean that it would be forbidden to possess these articles in the days of the King of York. The basic problem is the lustful emphasis that is instilled in the owners of these inanimate objects. The covetousness and lust for these gadgets far supersedes the spiritual love for neighbor and relative. There are very few things on this earth who toil, labor, or struggle harder for the neighbor. I'm sorry, let me read that over. There are very few beings on this earth who toil, labor, or struggle harder for the neighbor, brother, sister, or mother than their carnal possessions. We must cast aside the foolish, materialistic mentality and turn our minds to one another, wherein humanity, people, will again become the wealth of the world and one another. So that is the answer to the question in the study guide. There's question number 7, which is, are all modern devices to be banned or viewed as evil in the kingdom age? And the Father broke that down for us very clearly to the point where a fool couldn't err. Listen to the example that the Father gave as far as why these things are idols, and it's all about the mindset that we are in when we are engaging with these types of devices. Because we know the car was a excellent invention because it allowed man to go from point A to point B a lot faster, and we could carry things that we couldn't be able to carry on the back of horse carts and things of that nature. So there was an advantage. But creating these things with the wrong mind will cause us to begin to perceive these things as being considered progress, when a lot about it really isn't progress. It's really degress. Yeah, we're getting from point A to point B, but in the process of doing that, the auto exhaust pollutes the air. We're using fuel that comes from oil that they pump out of the earth, which is meant to be in the earth, and then that pollutes the earth as they are processing it and refining it to get it to be fuel. And a lot of the fuel that we use has chemicals in it that can cause the brain to receive damage over time, over long-term exposure to it. All these different things. But in the kingdom age, the idea is to take the same mind and create an invention that can do the same thing, but without all of the negative side effects. And not looking at those as being, we ain't got to worry about that. It doesn't matter in the long term. But those small things being significant to us, and we hold them in high regard, because it's about the benefit of man and putting man first in our lives instead of putting machines and materialistic objects first. We're supposed to look out for one another and be each other's keeper. So that means we have to create things that not only are efficient and make our lives more convenient, but can benefit each other and the environment as a whole. All right. So that's the question. That's the answer. Question number 7. So what I want to do before we move on to question number 8, because there's a lot of good information in this chapter, I want to go to page 102 of this chapter, and I want to talk about a topic that the Father brings up in this chapter relating to the curse of Ham. Okay, and I want to just read this briefly in our hearing, and then I'm going to show a video that relates to it. All right, so let's go to the bottom. Okay, so it says, the English translators purposely inserted serve in place of worship in order to mislead and deceive the reader. And we went over this in the last session that we had. a few weeks ago. We talked about the difference between the word shachah and the word oved or evade, which means, one, shachah means, for you to show obeisance to something or to show respect to. And in the scriptures, you see the term, they bent the knee to something. And then the word oved, which literally means to work for, to toil for in your actions. Okay, so we broke all that down in the last session. So if you want to get inside, scoop into that and what it means in Hebrew and how it relates to scriptures, you can go back to the last session. But the Father is just relating to how this word was inserted in the scriptures from the translators who were of a Greco-Roman mindset. Those that were believers in the faith of Christianity, they began, when they were translating the scriptures into the various languages, they began to insert words, sometimes unconsciously, that it wasn't an intentional misleading in the scriptures, but in many cases it was an intentional misleading. Okay, because they were trying to prevent us from accessing the true power of the scriptures from the Hebrew language. So they would mistranslate certain words intentionally to never give us an opportunity to get back on the path towards York. This is what he's referring to. It says further substantiation of many Euro-American deceptions is illustrated by the fraudulent interpretation of the lineage of Noah. Ham was one of Noah's 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Ham was the one son of Noah who was purportedly cursed black, according to Euro-American scholars. But in actuality, Canaan was the one cursed by Noah, and there is nothing written in the scriptures to suggest that he was cursed black. Generally, anyone cursed, as was Miriam, the sister of Moses, was cursed white. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, or in the true translation of their names, Ham's sons were Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya, and Canaan. In non-Hebrew Bibles, these Hebrew names were written in phonetics, whereas the so-called biblical scholars who translated and interpreted the Bible knew that Mizraim was translated as Egypt, Cush as Ethiopia, Put as Libya, and Canaan, although given no English translation, was nevertheless changed to Israel. So this is a point of contention inside, many, institutions of theology as regards to Christianity, and in many institutions of those who study the Bible from a Hebraic understanding, and those that are of the Jewish faith and their mosques and things of that nature. Many people put this idea of Ham being cursed black because the word Ham means hot or burnt, and relating that to being that's where black people come from, and Europeans were all the other races from the other sons of Noah. And this was a justification that was used for generations to say that black people were inferior to Europeans. Okay, this especially was used during the transatlantic slave trade. But we, in this dispensation of time, know that this is to be false. Okay, and that in ancient times, Noah and his sons, they were all dark-skinned individuals.